All right. We'll get the declaration. Go and take your notes out. Here we go. Put the phones away. No more middle names. All right. So, just to review. Just to review. What would be the punishment for treason according to the king? Yeah, what's one? What's, huh? Almost to death. Yeah. And then we go through the disembowelment. What's one more?
Drawing and quartering.
Drawing and quartering. Oh, well, that's a pretty good pirate. And the point is they'll be treated as traitors under English law. And that was in response to what petition that the Second Continental Congress sent? Yeah, the Olive Branch petition. And those are parts of the stepping stones to war, or the stepping stones to independence. Who was the philosopher who said, all people are endowed with certain natural rights. Amongst these are life, liberty, and property. Is that John Locke? Yeah, John Locke. The amazing John Locke. Amazing as in his influence. He was, a lot of it was to justify wealth too, but John Locke. And who was the philosopher who his work would basically trigger the Enlightenment? Because the idea of having a law that dictated the universe. Yeah. Isaac Newton. Isaac Newton. Did I tell you the 4 words he said in Parliament?
Yes.
Please close the window. Yeah. And you know, why not? It also just goes to show you that people can be really, really good at one thing. Doesn't mean they're competent or smart at all in any other thing. If somebody's good at one thing, that doesn't at all mean they're smart at anything else. Usually it kind of means the opposite. Yeah. Got to be honest. Yeah. Do I? Cut yourself? I think I might have one.
Yes, please.
I used to have a Hello Kitty one. This is the first one to give people.
Wait, what were you saying? He's put for this week because they talked about everything they needed to know. So this week they're not going to do it. So there's no, I'm not talking about it.
Yeah. That'd be a great one. This is a top hair bandage, but it's the best.
Yeah, like I mean, like
And
go and they're not going to talk about it.
who is the main author of the Declaration of Independence? Yeah, go ahead.
It'd be Thomas Jefferson.
That would be Thomas Jefferson. Yeah. And what's Independence Day? Yeah. July 2nd. But the document was not yet ready. And so, let's get to the philosophy of the Declaration of Independence. We got to cover this, and that means we got to do a little bit of reading in class. You guys get a chance to read, and that's why I gave you the document. And you'll notice that the print is small because you are arguably spry. Arguably. I gotta do something really quick. Never had time to do this in the morning. Let me do something very quickly. Alright, here we go. So what I'm going to do is, we're going to have a volunteer to read this. Okay, speak quiet. Volunteer to read this, and I will stop you gently with the idea of being, we're going to read certain parts of it, just the first few paragraphs. Because this Declaration of Independence, the first few paragraphs are going to have an incredible influence around the world. Much more than anyone ever dreamed, and certainly was not the reason for the document. It was just simply, hey, this is justified, and look at us, France. And France was an autocratic monarchy. They certainly didn't believe in any of this stuff. And so, in Congress, July 4th, unanimous declaration of the 13 United States. I should add that right there is a lie. There's only 12. One abstained. It was not unanimous. But you know what the heck, right? You got to sell it. And so, I'm looking for someone to volunteer to read. The first one, I have to read a little bit, but if I want to read the first part, can you read it? So it's right here. It says the Declaration of Independence. First part, yeah, go ahead, Thomas. I'm gonna stop right there real quick because one thing you notice that the United is not capitalized. There were no grammatical rules. There's no dictionary yet. Don't read a lot into this. They will later on. They will later on. Like about 1860. Civil War. Okay, keep reading. When. This is, which, by the way, what a great beginning. Go. Stop right there. So, right there. Good job. Did you catch those two things? First off, it's, hey, we have good reason. We mean it. We have a good, just reason. We're not just mad at this moment and throwing a tantrum. We mean it. But did you catch it? There's two phrases. Two phrases that are really important. The laws of nature and nature's God. What philosophy? Yeah, this is deism. That is deism. So one important thing about the philosophy of the Declaration of Independence, it is just wrapping deism. That there is a creator who flipped the switch and then did what? Stop back. Watched it all go on. So it's very deist. Nature's God, deism. All right. Now I will once again gently stop you. Anybody else want to volunteer now to read? Go ahead, Sam.
We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal.
Stop right there. Now, I'm going to be clear one thing. It says, we hold these truths to be self-evident. They all think this was self-evident? No, not at all. Did the 5 men who wrote this hold this as self-evident? No, they did not at all. This is what we call, in our idealized version, to show how enlightened we are. Do we really believe this? Come on. We're all equal. You're a nut. But what makes the document so good, so amazing, is we're not stuck in 1776. I don't know if you know this, but this is 2024. We can adapt our thinking. We can take different meaning out of this, as people all over the world are going to read the Declaration of Independence. There are good and bad things about the United States of America, as we all know. There's things the U.S. has done is good or bad. But this is something that people have idealized. This Declaration of Independence all over the world. Equal? Wow. A nation based upon this? Kind of unheard of. Even if they didn't believe it. It's there on paper, isn't it? So, this is the first step of this. Let's get right to equality. Now, let's be very clear. When they said this, they didn't really believe this. The closest Jefferson would get is maybe all men. But when he said all men, what kind of men? White. And he didn't really necessarily believe that either. I mean, there's equal, then there's equal. Now, Jefferson would become more into saying all white men are equal. But we don't have to be stuck right there. We don't have to say, well, Jefferson was just thinking, kind of white men. That's it. Nobody else can be equal. We can interpret this as something else. And so, for example, at Seneca Falls in 1848, where women and some men got together in the first women's rights conference in world history, United States, upstate New York. They wrote their declaration. And their declaration said, we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men and women are created equal. And they said, no, we want more. We're not going to stop right there. And we don't have to say just white men. We don't have to stop there. In fact, it was really common to simply say, when we talk about all men, meaning all people. Anybody know, but you all do probably, what Neil Armstrong said when he supposedly landed on the moon? We know the truth. No, when Neil Armstrong landed on the moon, he stepped off, and what did he say? You know? One small step.
One small step for man.
When he said one small step for a man, but the A was blocked out for the transmission. One small step for a man.
Giant leap for mankind.
Yeah, mankind. He was not just meaning males. He meant all humans. So that was common. I sometimes do it because I grew up with like men meaning all people, which I know we're skipping a lot. I sometimes say it because I was, you're stuck with kind of what you learned with. But we can say this as all humans. We don't have to be stuck there. The founding document. And you notice it doesn't say only people who live in the colonies. Only citizens of this country, which is just starting to be used, citizens. It's everybody. He doesn't restrict it. All men are created equal as long as you live in this geographic area. It's everybody. Abigail Adams, John Adams' wife, knew they were doing this. And she's actually back up in Quincy, which is a suburb of Boston. She wrote down to her husband. She had great influence on her husband. Let's put the phone away. She had great influence on her husband. Great influence. She's brilliant. But she was also stuck in a time where women could not have the roles of influence like her husband did. And he knew it. He was in awe of his wife. But at the same time, he was a man. And she wrote back, just very simply wrote down, when you're talking about equality, you're talking about liberty. She said, don't forget the ladies. I just like how she put it. Don't forget the ladies. Sounds like very 1700s. But people knew they were forgetting people. And that's the reason Abigail Adams is important. It's not that they remembered the ladies. It's that this was not unanimous. Everybody did not just accept that only a few people are going to be equal. They knew back then that they were leaving people out. And if they knew back then, we can learn from that and say, they knew, we can adapt and learn from those who resisted that and include everybody else. Which, of course, is a tough thing. What does equality even mean? And they're thinking equality under the law. Doesn't matter if you're the son of a king, or the commonest peasant. The law applies to you. The law applies. Commonist? Let's go with that. I like that. I was going to say commoner, it came out commonist. And there's Abigail Adams right there. So regardless of your class. So the king is not above the law. Oh, for that measure, remember the Corsi Acts. And British, especially soldiers, could potentially commit a crime and be tried in London. They're not above the law. There's not a hierarchy of law. And that is one of the founding principles of the United States. It's always worked that way. It's everybody, does the law equally apply to everybody today? Hey, if you can't afford a lawyer, what's going to happen to you? Huh? Okay, that's relatively new. And how overstaffed the people who actually do that for people who can't afford it, or understaffed they are, and how hard they have to work. This is how talented those people are, who can help people who don't have much money. They'll never match the team of lawyers the wealthy people can have. If you don't believe me, try to sue Walmart. Which, by the way, Walmart commits crimes all the time. If they're a monopoly, by definition, that's a crime. Good luck suing Walmart with their thousands of lawyers. They have more lawyers than the Department of Justice of the United States of America. And so, there are some issues. And you probably also know, who's in prison. People who are convicted of felonies can delay and wait and never go. So it's unequal. Next, did he mean equality of opportunity? No. He did not mean the same opportunity. And he certainly did not mean egalitarianism. He did not think this. Jefferson's point of view would be, yes, all men are created equal, but I'm wealthy because I deserve it. And no one deserves my wealth because no one has the same intelligence and brilliance I have, so I deserve it. And one more thing. What about slaves? No. Of course not. You can imagine how especially some southern plantation owners were like, are you kidding? All men are created equal? Well, 40% of enslaved people could read. They'll tell others, are you sure you want this? Who would issue the first decree that Britain would follow for the rest of the war, saying slaves would be free if they fought for the British? You remember his name? The last royal governor of Virginia. Who's it, Jim? Hey, you thought you had it?
I wrote it down.
I'm going to start throwing things at you unless you find it. Yeah.
Dunmore?
Lord Dunmore, very good. You saved everybody. All right. I used to have a bunch of cinder blocks. I put them in another room. Students played a practical joke on me about 10 years ago. Some other got in my room and covered my door with cinder blocks. So when I opened it up, there was a wall of cinder blocks. That was a practical joke. I wasn't fooled, though, because they were all waiting down the hallway to see my reaction. If you're waiting to see a reaction, then you know, or they know something's up. I used to send them to teachers around. So with that, so I ran out. Now let's go to this. So that's equality. Who would like to read next? We stopped right at all men are created equal. No, you're done. You're done. Go ahead, Spencer.
That they are endowed by their creator with certain
Well done. Want me to hit it louder next time?
Yes.
And the best, it's hollow underneath, so you're really good to get a good echo. Yes, I've got 4 podiums. So, unalienable rights. What does unalienable mean? At this time, an alien meant somebody who, the best way to look at it is somebody who's not part of your country, a citizen of your country. That means everybody. Citizen or not, we all have them. Citizen or not. Alien meant citizen. If you think alien and you think, you know, the Greys and people from outer space coming here, there were no flying saucers or anything until the Cold War. Then also people start seeing flying saucers all over. Of course, that could be a conspiracy to cover it up. Moving on, all have them. And so alien meant unalienable. Doesn't matter if you're living here or not here, we all have them. And that's an important element. Wow, everybody has these rights. Once again, Jefferson's like, boy, this sounds like I'm smart and care. I don't really believe it. So, John Locke, of course, but also French, Hutchinson. Hutchinson was a philosopher, English philosopher, who took that property and changed that to something else. So Hutchinson had great influence, but he's somebody that's kind of unknown. You go to the Library of Congress, and you have a bunch of Hutchinson's work that Jefferson's had, and then the Library of Congress basically started with Jefferson's great library. Oh, Jefferson knew slavery was horrific. He knew. He terrified of the result, what slavery might do to this new country. But he really liked his library, and he liked his wine. He didn't want to give it up. Slaves. So, that is equal. All people have it, and you're born with them. You have it. Now, what that means is down the road. Who would like to read next? Need a volunteer. Go ahead, Andy.
But among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness.
You knew I was going to stop right there. Life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. What's life? You notice these aren't like, this is not law. This is not law. What this is these are guidelines for our foundation. And anything that a government must do must talk about protecting life. So there's a series of laws about life or liberty or pursuit of happiness. What's life? Now, I say life and we all know it, but I know some of you are thinking, well, I don't want to answer this because I know it must be a trick. You're only partially correct. What's life? Life is life? Oh, good. Liberty is liberty. What's alive? What's alive? What things are alive? Plants are alive. Cows are alive. Chickens are alive. Pigs are alive. Wait. Slaves are alive. Would we say they have rights? But they're saying we have rights. Why do we have rights and a pig doesn't? Do not say it again.
So they're not very.
Pigs are actually really bright. Yeah. Pigs someday will run the universe. Story. But
Other people should be problems.
reptoids. So, think about it for a second. What about us makes us different than a slave? What do we have? What decides our fate according to this? Does anybody else decide our fate? Because we are what? We're not owned by somebody, or, let's be honest, you don't have this yet. Other people make decisions for you all the time, correct? And that's accepted, even though you're right now at the age where you're really breaking away, which is going to become dramatic, but you're breaking away. What do we have? What are we that we make our own decisions? What are we? No one else can tell us what to do because of what? We're what? Say it again. No, it's not. Don't think about color of skin. Yeah. Sovereign. We have power over ourselves. What do we call that? Power over ourselves. We're not dependent upon somebody else. No one can tell us what to do. We're independent. Sovereign's actually a really good word for that too. We're independent. We have independence. We decide that. So it's nothing to do with any other rights. If somebody takes away our rights, we are dependent. You are still dependent. But soon you won't be. Slaves are owned. They don't have life because somebody else dictates their life. Or for that matter, a pig or a cow or a chicken. What's liberty? Oh, I've almost forgotten. You can't infringe on other rights. Just because you're independent, you can't infringe on other people's life, independence. Which is kind of a bad one. That means you can't, for example, enslave people. Contradictions abound. Liberty. What's liberty? Okay, it is freedom, but it's more important than freedom. It's not being able to do whatever you want. You can't just do whatever you want. What decides what you do? Why don't I walk through the aisles right now and just start hitting people or hitting with a hammer? What keeps me from doing that?
Self-control.
Laws are laws.
Not very well.
Kind is kind. What decides it? Yeah, morality. What is your moral compass? What do we call that? Your conscience. This is freedom of conscience. We don't obey laws because there's a law. We obey laws because we have weighed the options and decided. And it could be because I know that hitting people over the head with a hammer would be wrong. I would be arrested. It is immoral. It is unkind, and I want to be a good person. But all of you have broken laws. Everybody but me has lied. What did I just do there? Lied. Everyone does. We make moral decisions all the time. But all of us have broken laws. I mean, who's been in a car that's been going 26 in a 25 mile per hour zone? Nobody in here, but other people have.
I've never been the driver. Does that count?
You should have stopped them. You're an accomplice.
Don't look at me.
Huh? No, but the point is we all make moral decisions. It's not the law. Hey, we don't decide to follow a lead, or we don't follow a leader because they're the leader. We follow the leader because we decide to. We decide to. Now, they might also have a gun to our head, but we make decisions. We weigh the options. And the option might be, I'm going to obey, but we weigh the options. And lastly, what's pursuit of happiness? This one's much harder. Okay, lots of properties. But what's the most valuable piece of property that everybody has?
Themselves.
But what makes you happy?
Money.
And they're thinking,
Money.
well, could be.
Yeah. Power. Yeah.
But everyone has a different degree of what makes you happy. What's your most valuable piece of property that every one of you have? Huh? But most people don't have a David Bowie shrine. Is there another one? Huh?
Serious. Hands,
Hands,
body,
mind,
yourself.
body, what you can do with it, opposable thumbs.
Those are used to.
Here's what it is. We all have abilities, potential, knowledge. And this is we go as far as our ability, as far as our potential can take us. Our mind, our body, our labor. And that could lead to money. That could lead to any number of things. But that is our most valuable piece of property. And you can't do that. You can't go as far as your ability takes you if you're not independent. If you can't make decisions on your own. You can't do anything. You're stuck. And then, of course, let's be clear. Let's go back to my greatest skill is hitting people over the head with a hammer and stealing their money. I'm really good at it. That's my ability. Well, I'm equal opportunity. You can't infringe on others. As long as you don't infringe on other rights. Same deal. And lastly, that is why to lock property was so important. If any time your property can be taken away. Now, he was actually thinking when he wrote this, like land or wealth. But also, if you are a prisoner and enslaved, that is your most valuable property and you're no longer independent. So if a tyrant can take away your life, liberty, or pursuit of happiness, you cannot possibly enjoy your rights. And so, property is more important than just simply land under this concept. Now, of course, it's variable, but that's where we're at. Not everyone has this. And there, of course, is Patrick Henry, give me liberty or give me death, as he said in the Virginia House of Burgesses. But of course, showing the contradiction, he had 300 slaves. Mm-hmm. So we have to go back through this. Does it do any good to condemn Thomas Jefferson for slavery, and then therefore we can't look at the Declaration of Independence? Because he's dead. We can't go back. We can still learn from that and say, wow, Jefferson was amazing here and a cruel, horrible slave owner. Let's move on. Let's learn. We can hold two thoughts in our head. We're really smart people in here. And lastly, it's called the social contract. It wasn't called the social contract when Locke wrote it. It wasn't called the social contract when Jefferson wrote it. But soon a philosopher from France, some of you might have heard of Rousseau, would write that in a book called The Social Contract. So who would like to read next? We are right at Pursuit of Happiness. Jefferson was so good. We've only had a sentence, 2 sentences, not I mean, 1 sentence, and he has said so much. That's talent. Who would like to read next? I'm looking for a volunteer. This one you already read it once. Or do I get to volunteer somebody? That's also fun for me too. Who would like to read? Anybody? Go ahead, Sarah.
That to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed.
Good. Stop right there. I hit my finger that I hurt. Sorry. There. Are you happy now? Consent of the governed. Governments get their power from the people. Governments power from the consent. People have to give up something to consent government. We make a contract with those governing us, a deal. You do this, and we'll give you the power. We give up a little bit. Yeah.
Wait, so people, the government gets permission from the people they're
governing. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. But it might not seem like if it's a dictator. But a dictator can't be in power unless the people accept it. And you probably know what happens to dictators if they're removed from power. You know, they're usually killed. So they need the people to consent. Who would like to read after that? Good job, Sarah, but now we need somebody else right after the consent of the governed. I'm looking for a happy-go-lucky volunteer. Yeah. Go ahead, Alec.
That whenever any form of government becomes destructive of these ends, it is the right of the people to alter or abolish it, and to institute new government, laying its foundation on such principles and organizing its power in such form as to them shall seem most likely to affect their safety and happiness.
Very good. And you'll notice there's just random capitalized letters. Don't read too much into it. And so it is 2 things from that One sentence. It is the government's only function to protect rights. Now, we might argue what rights are going to be protected. You could get a tyrant who will say, I really got to infringe your rights because an enemy will come and take everything you have. And people will say, yeah, I'm going to give up something, but I want at least some form of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And that's really common. And then if a government infringes on those rights, it is the duty. They must change the government. And that's the social contract. People give power to government to protect rights. That's the deal. If the government breaks the deal by infringing on rights, the people must change it. Now, this could be simply, think about a democratic republic, kind of like the United States. You change government. It could be a new form of government, a new constitution, or it could be revolution. There's lots of ways. And trust me, we're going to disagree on what changing the government is. Not everyone's going to agree with this. And so, that's, we're right at prudence. Who would like to read after prudence? Dear Prudence. Anybody volunteering? Jaden, thank you for stepping up to the plate, volunteering.
Prudence indeed will dictate that governments long established should not be changed for light and transient causes. And accordingly, all experience hath shown that mankind are more disposed to suffer, while equals are sufferable, than to right themselves by abolishing the forms to which they are accustomed.
Good. And the big thing about that is, hey, we better be serious about it. And people can suffer through a lot. Changing the government, a revolution, even just writing a new constitution, is really, really hard. So people go through a lot, especially when some people are really suffering and others aren't. Oh yeah, we know we're mistreating some people, but I lost pretty good. So people can suffer through that, which is unfair, but it happens. So we're right on, they're accustomed. So we're right at the word but. Who would like to read them? Last one. Who would like to be the anchorman? I like volunteering other people. Very good. Zephyr, you want to give it a try?
When a long train of abuses and absorptions pursue invariably the same object is designed to reduce them under absolute. It is their right, it is their duty to offset government by new birth for the future security.
Very good. Usurpation, so basically taking away people's rights. But if this happens long enough, it is the duty. So, a couple things come out of this then. The first thing is this. That means the people have the power. The people are sovereign. And that kind of implies some kind of democracy. The people have power. And lastly, if the people must change the government, they got to know when to change it. When there's a long chain of usurpations, we must change it. Therefore, it is the duty of the people to remain vigilant. They've got to pay attention. So you can imagine, if you want to be a tyrant, what's the number one thing you do? Make sure people what? Huh? Well, besides like you. Yeah, hey, every tyrant's going to give well, think about the Roman emperors. The bread and circuses. They give you food and entertainment. You have to know if your rights are being taken away. If you're a dictator, what do you do about the news? They want to keep people in the dark. You don't want people to know the news. You don't want people to know what's going on. If I was a dictator, I would make sure that you only knew what I wanted you to know. Only what I wanted you to know. Propaganda. Make sure like the news arm would only cover what I want you to know. It is your duty. Did you know there's an election coming up? So I went to the open house last night and had a lot of parents come, but a lot from last year too. Which is nice and not so much fun. Never seen anyone. But I got home. Good story, huh? So far, right? And I was alone. And so I turned on the television, a little bit, I was gonna see if there was a game or something to watch, or wasn't, but did you know there's commercials for politics? Did you know that? You don't know that? Constantly? If we lived in Pennsylvania, we would be inundated. You think it's bad here. Pennsylvania's insane about that. The presidency all relies upon one state, Pennsylvania. But back to this. I found out that there are massive hordes of they said illegal immigrants coming to the United States more than ever before. I also found out that crime was going up faster than it ever was before from these commercials. I learned a lot from these commercials. The only problem was those are both completely and totally untrue. Crime is dropping like a rock. And immigration has been cut by 50, undocumented immigrants have been cut down by 50% in the last 6 months. Vigilance can be hard, can't it? Now, I knew that, but obviously not everybody else does. Yeah, violent crime was about twice, or double in the 1990s than what it is today. What double? I know what you're thinking. Yeah, I could take it all a lot tougher, you guys couldn't, but no, violent crime's a lot lower. Immigration varies. A lot of it's going on because of the governments and trade issues in Latin America. And about half of all undocumented immigrants are from Europe. They just oversee the visa. So, but that's why you have to maintain vigilance. That's my point. Did everyone catch my meaning there? That means trust commercials. They never lie. I was kind of I'm awe. I know they lie, but you know, I really paid attention. Normally I just zone it out. So that's social conflict. These are the three big deals. Not only are these going to be really important, they will make great questions on the test. So then the rest of it's reasons. And this is what they say about history of the President King George, his repeated injuries and usurpations. I'm glad they don't use usurpations much anymore. It's a focus on the king. They focused on the tyrant. It's hard to be mad at Parliament. Just like today. Actually, Congress, people don't like Congress, even though a lot of people don't know even what they do. But it's hard to just focus on Congress. They're bad. But the tyrant, we can focus on somebody who's evil. And so they played on people's fears, and that's a word that I'm going to use over and over again, so you have to make sure you know. It's called demagoguery. So a demagogue is somebody who plays on people's fears. Those two commercials I told you about were all using demagoguery. The commercials we see here are either for Tester, the sitting senator, or against Tester. And those were against Tester. And these are the grievances. So these are just some of them. So they blame him for everything. Cutting off our trade with all parts of the world, that's that. Cutting for the mercantilism and closing Boston Harbor. Imposing taxes without our consent, Stamp Act, etc. This is abdicating government by declaring us out of its protection and waging war against us. That's the fighting at Lexington and Concord. Transporting large armies of foreign mercenaries. Soon, mercenaries from Germanic kingdoms will be brought over by the British. And excited domestic insurrection amongst us, slave rebellion. It's the king who triggered slave rebellion, and the king who triggered American Indians along the frontier from fighting back. They blame the king for everything. Could the king have done all of this? No. Why they blame the king? Why not? So some of these are legit, some of these aren't. But blame the king for everything. And then we'll come back to Jefferson and slavery. What was created? Well, this goes through the whole thing where they talk about basically they created from 13 colonies a nation. Originally it was the United Colonies of America, but then the United States. Has everyone got that? They create the United States. And lastly, what came first? States or the country called the United States? I know you might be thinking, is that the chicken or the egg? What came first? This is important. States or United States? They were colonies, and then they became states. They became states when what was created? The United States. And so that's what the United States would say in 1861. But the Confederacy will say, no, the States came first, and so we can leave. To reject slavery. We're talking the Civil War. Who would win? The United States won the Civil War. So, moving on. So I want to read through this, go through it. It's an important document. And even though they never dreamt it would be remembered the way it was, this document would be one of the greatest influences that the United States would have. So many people would use the writings of the Declaration of Independence. And we're talking everywhere. I mean, just looking at Europe alone, the French Revolution, German and Italian unification. Heck, even the communist revolution in Russia are going to use the Declaration of Independence as justification. Now, we can disagree or agree with what their main principles were, but what a document. So, as I told you, it was not ready for 2 days. Most of the people who signed it signed long afterwards. Why did they sign it afterwards? The war fell apart. And now it was like, hey, you better sign this thing and prove you mean it and not back down now. Now, of course, what's going to happen is a few didn't sign it. And you see this right here? That was the handbill or poster that was sent out to let people know in the United States, hey, guess what? You're now an independent country. They're like, whoa, okay. That's how they found out. So they sent the copy of this Declaration of Independence, done by a printing press, Hancock, right here as president of the Congress. And you'll notice, you see it? You see it? So when people found out, they found out from this handbill which said July 4th. That's why we celebrate July 4th as Independence Day, when it is not Independence Day. From sending out this handbill, which I was thinking had to be kind of funny, like all of a sudden, oh, what, we're in the United States? Have you heard of the Liberty Bell? Has anyone seen the Liberty Bell? Do you? Have you heard of it? The idea was when they read out the Declaration of Independence, they rang this bell so hard, it says Liberty right on there. There's a picture of me I took right after. My wife took of me standing there, but I look like everybody standing in front of it. So I'm not going to show you that. Like that. But they ran it so hard it cracked. Is that true? No, of course not. There's a problem with forging it cracked. It says Liberty on it, yet they get dupes to pay money to go see it. It's a tourist trap. I'm one of those dupes. I paid. I wanted to see it. But it was purely made up. It's purely made up. Not true at all. Not true at all. So, we now have a civil war. And these are things I told you already. So just so you remember, so get this down really quick. We have the Patriots, Whigs, Tories, or Loyalists, and neutral. And most people were neutral. Or a plurality of neutral people, plurality, 45% or so. Loyalists, yeah, we're just guessing. Probably more loyalists. But you know what I put for neutral? I put if. Most people were neutral. They just want to survive. Survival is difficult. It's not their fight. If no one bugs me. If no one votes me in. If no one marches by my farm and takes all my food. That's what's going to happen. Armies back then would provision by literally liberating food from farmers, called foraging parties. They didn't have enough supplies on their own. Both armies would do it. Who's going to have the bigger army? Especially if they're speaking a different language. So, we'll do some fighting tomorrow. Oh, one more thing. In that packet I gave you under the Bacon's Rebellion, under the fornication laws, please read one more part of the Declaration of Independence. That when Adams and Franklin saw it, they crossed it out so hard that their pen actually went through the paper. So this was proposed, this paragraph, part of the draft, a draft of the Declaration of Independence. Please read that. And underneath, jot down why Adams and Franklin went, no! Remember, these are blaming the king for every problem. I'm not the phone well. The button up, long, round. And you know why we're talking why? Why?
So we got
Oh, everybody, on your way out, put that copy of the Declaration of Independence on the middle desk on your way out. Thank you, Gene, I totally forgot. Oh, yeah?
Oh, sorry.
Of course. And that brown is a lit, it doesn't look, yeah, it's almost, it's not quite black, it looks a lot better. Go again, keep running. Read the paragraph and we're going to be finishing up the war in 2 days. Yeah, watch videos, and I'm hoping for the test on Tuesday, so. What we can do is this.
See what we're doing now.
Yeah, I totally. I'm a little. This took longer than I thought. Wall sits. Right there. You have to do wall sits. Whole period. And take those off. Yeah, so you slip out. Yeah, I know. Huh? Let me see it. Wow! Very fast. So, we're doing a lot of war stuff. Yeah. You got watch video, critique it. Yep. Reading. We're not gonna have to listen. Because it took too long. Yeah, go ahead. Oh, we gotta shut the camera off. Huh? Oh, you got your glasses?
I hate it so much.
You hate your glasses? Contacts don't work for you?
I can't see anything. It drives me crazy. I tried the one and I like it almost.
That's, sorry. And you don't like the glasses, this the way you see out of them, or they
I
don't
don't
feel
like
good?
one of my eyes is way worse than the other one. So one lens is just like there's one thing, the other ones are kind of new.
They're one big lens, one big. They're not quite, yeah, they're not. There's not much to do.
Not noticeable unless you stare at
And do you, does it affect your, depth perception?
Yeah, it's a strange man. A lot.
So like when you walk right now, it's your depth perception, because one eye.
I'm so used to it, so it
You're
doesn't
down.
bother me at all. How many times do I sleep a day?
Huh?
How many times do I sleep a day? Well,
I can see that. I have one eye a lot worse than the other, so I
my whole family does. So it's like a whole, my entire family, everybody. Even my sister, hers just isn't bad enough to do with my cheek glasses.
I get it, I get it.
Suicide was fake. Oh my God. No, that would work.